This is Mac OS Ken.
Raising a target in a downer way, Travel and Tim tackles India and hints of new Macs ahead. It is Monday, the 24th of April, 2023. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Use code MacOSKen50 at factormeals.com/MacOSKen50 for 50% off your first box. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSKen. It's not often we get a downbeat note that raises Apple's price target, and yet JP Morgan analysts delivered just such a thing last week. Apple Insider ran part of a note from the firm, mixed messages and all. Actually, it's not quite right to say the messages were mixed. The messages were iPhone supply chain has recovered from its December quarter issues. Modest beats for the March quarter should please investors, and demand for everything Apple makes besides iPhone will suck wind for the rest of this year. On the modest beats, the firm's note has upped its expectations slightly. It had been looking for revenue of $92.7 billion for the March quarter on earnings per share of $1.44. It's now looking for revenue of $94.9 billion on EPS of $1.49. Both of those are ahead of the Street's call for revenue of $92.5 billion on earnings per share of $1.43. If I'm reading the note correctly, or the parts of the note run by Apple Insider, supports for Apple include iPhone, new stuff on the horizon, and Apple's miraculous ability to squeeze blood from a turnip. Quoting the note, while focus is starting to already shift towards the potential launch of a VR headset in June and the next iPhone launch in September, the limited changes to estimates, despite a tough macro, is going to support continued outperformance in the meantime. Yeah, I might flip back to my mixed messages thesis. Or maybe it's not the message that's mixed, but the world. While the firm expects Apple to see a decline in revenue for the current quarter and maybe even the whole fiscal year, the piece has JP Morgan calling Apple a relative safe haven given the tough macro. JP Morgan has a positive rating on Apple shares. The firm used last week's note to raise its end-of-the-year price target on the shares from $175 to $190. The next iPhone and the anticipated mixed reality headset are potential near-term catalysts for Apple. For steady growth over time, though, at least one firm is looking towards India. Last week was the week for that, of course. As anticipated, Apple CEO Tim Cook did jet to the subcontinent to open the company's first 2 stores in India, Apple BKC in Mumbai and Apple Saket in New Delhi. In the near term, a piece from 9to5Mac says dramatic growth in India may be the bright spot in Apple's second quarter fiscal year 2023 earnings. That site cites a Bloomberg report that says Apple's revenue in India has increased nearly 50% in the past year. Quoting Bloomberg, Apple's sales in India hit a new high of almost $6 billion in the year through March, highlighting the market's increasing importance for the iPhone maker. Revenue in India grew by nearly 50% from $4.1 billion a year earlier, according to a person familiar with the matter who was asked not to be named as the information is not public. Then why'd you even? As with China before it, the last year in India is still basically just the start of what the subcontinent is expected to offer. Establishing Apple stores in the country is a key part of the company's growth plans, according to 9to5Mac. The question, though, could Apple grow faster in India than it did in China? On the company's last earnings call, CEO Cook said that Apple is taking what it's learned in China and bringing that to bear in India, so yeah, that could help. Additionally, another note cited on Apple Insider, this one from Wedbush, says Apple's 2 new stores are the start of an aggressive push to grow in the country. Quoting the firm's note, for years, Apple has tangentially gone after the India market with some success, as India revenue is only roughly $6 billion, less than 2% of global revenues, with minimal presence in the country. That dynamic will be changing as Apple is now aggressively looking at India from both a production and retail expansion over the coming years that we believe will be a strategic poker move for Cupertino that could ramp annual revenue to $20 billion by 2025 in India. And so they are raising their target not one bit. First of all, the target's already pretty high, $205, according to the report. Additionally, things could take time. Quoting the note again, Rome was not built overnight, and neither will Apple's broader India strategy, but we view this week as Apple diving into the deep end of the pool in India as this massive market slowly converts into the Apple ecosystem over the coming years, with iPhone market gains front and center. The note goes on to say, as Foxconn and Apple put more skin in the game on the iPhone production front within India, this will go hand in hand with a bigger retail presence within India as seen this week, which mirrors the early days of the China penetration strategy going back a decade. Golly, it's almost like Apple is taking what it's learned in China and bringing it to bear in India. Of course, Apple's CEO turning up for the store openings, interviews, and other happenings probably didn't hurt. The site Apple Must tracked a few comments as Cook made his way around the country. In an interview with Business Line, Cook was quoted as saying, "We view India as great from a number of points of view. I think the skill here is very unique. The vibrancy of the people and the culture, the dynamism of the market, the feeling that anything is possible. All of these things bode well for India's future, and we want to be part of it. I can't stress enough, we are all in. India, over time, will be one of Apple's largest markets." Economic Times had a similar Cook quote, "India is at a tipping point. You can just feel the vibrancy, the dynamism, the feeling that anything here is possible, and it's so great to be part of it." Of course, personal touches are likely to carry weight. I saw a headline someplace that said something like, "Tim Cook is in India and he can't stop tweeting about it." Twitter being as messed up as it is these days, I'm not sure I got the count exactly right, but Apple CEO posted somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 messages with pictures at places ranging from cultural sites to meetings with developers and other creatives, to a handshake with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, to, of course, staff and surroundings at Apple's 2 new stores. You can retrace his travels on his Twitter feed, twitter.com/Tim_Cook. And we will, of course, be talking about Apple and India for years and years to come. More news in a moment, but first I am very happy to welcome a new sponsor to macOS Ken. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Hey, maybe cooking's not your thing. Maybe you want to cook some meals but not others. Maybe you just want to spend less time in the kitchen and more time anywhere but the kitchen. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and get back to doing what it is you want to do. Do you have a certain diet you follow? Factor has flavor-packed options on the menu each week, including keto, calorie smart, vegan plus veggie, and protein plus. Prepared by chefs and approved by dietitians, each meal has all of the ingredients you need to feel satisfied all day long while meeting your goals. The sun-dried tomato chicken I had last week was incredible. The sauce was amazing, and the chicken itself was better than the chicken I get at the store. And it was like 10 minutes in the oven. I know I said 2 earlier, that's for the microwave, but whichever way you go, there's no prep, there's no cleanup, just truly delicious meals. We'll talk more about them throughout the week, but don't wait. Head to factormeals.com/MacOSKen50 and use code MacOSKen50 to get 50% off your first box. That's code MacOSKen50 at factormeals.com/MacOSKen50 to get 50% off your first box. factormeals.com/MacOSKen50 and code MacOSKen50. And a big thanks to Factor for sponsoring this week's show. You know, today's theme may be mixed messages. There were a couple of posts about the anticipated, though unannounced, 15-inch MacBook Air last week, one indicating release relatively soon, and one seeing the machine hitting around the fall. That second one came from a heavy hitter, though, TF International analyst Ming-Chi Kuo. Using every bit of his paid-for verification, Young MC posted on Twitter, the new 15-inch MacBook model should be named MacBook Air. To reiterate, the upcoming 15-inch MacBook Air will feature the M2 series and offer 2 processor spec options. However, 2 options are more likely to be M2 with different cores, similar to the M2 13-inch MacBook Air. Mass production of M3 chip is anticipated to begin in the second half of 2023, slightly ahead of M3 Pro and M3 Max. And finally, the analyst says peak component shipments for the 15-inch MacBook Air should start early in the September quarter, with peak assembly hitting late in the September quarter. Perhaps at odds with the late in Q3 timeframe is a piece from Bloomberg, highlighted by 9to5Mac. According to that, Bloomberg cites developer logs which have leaked now that Apple has started testing the new MacBook Air with third-party apps from the App Store to validate their compatibility. Such testing now makes release 3 or 4 months from now seem lengthy to me. Then again, my perception could be colored by how much I want to see and maybe buy a 15-inch MacBook Air. If a Mac you can take on the run isn't your bag, there is still stuff in the wings that might pique your interest. The Twitter bio for Nicholas Alvarez lists him as an award-winning Git repository surgeon with a collection of non-marketable skills. Late last week on Twitter, Alvarez posted a message, Mac 14,8, Mac 14,13, and Mac 14,14 spotted in Find My configuration. A piece from Mac Rumors points out that those are designations for Macs that are so far unreleased. Alvarez says they showed up in a list of devices where you left your device behind should be disabled, so they're likely desktops. Writing about this tweet, Mac Rumors says, the list in Apple's configuration file relates to overriding separation monitoring, which suggests that these could be desktop Mac models that do not need to be actively tracked via Find My for separation from the user, the way portable Macs do. If you're thinking of trading in current gear for hot newness through Apple, you'll be doing it through a whole new site. Ahead of Earth Day 2023 last weekend, a piece from 9to5Mac said that Apple had launched an all-new site for trading in gear. While the report points to the environmental part of the trade-in site, it's kind of a bitter pill. Yes, getting value from Apple for a device that might end up in the refurbished store is kind of cool. But the part of the site that says, if your device isn't eligible for credit, we'll recycle it for free, it's good for you and the planet, doesn't feel as good as I think it's supposed to. This coming from a guy who found out recently that Apple will recycle my 15-inch 2018 MacBook Pro for free. It's good for me and the planet. We'll wrap the day with a couple of video stories, one that might warm the cockles and another that might crush them. I really should look up what cockles are. Anyway, Apple's got a new Christmas special in the works. Apple Insider says Hannah Whaddingham, boss lady Rebecca Welton from Ted Lasso, and the scary shouting shame nun from Game of Thrones, she's doing the Christmas thing. I'm guessing more Rebecca, less Anella. According to Apple, Hannah Whaddingham, Home for Christmas, will deliver a captivating night to remember, featuring dazzling performances and musical numbers from the Olivier-nominated actress Hannah Whaddingham, as well as special surprise guests. Apple's press release says the show will be recorded live in front of an audience at the London Coliseum, which makes it sound gigantic. I looked it up, though. Wikipedia says it seats about 2,300 people, which, yeah, okay, is a lot of people. It's not Wembley, though. It'll be produced by the same team that did the Mariah Carey Christmas specials for Apple TV Plus and directed by the guy who directed Rihanna's Super Bowl halftime show for Apple Music. While no hard date has been announced, it is set to debut for the 2023 holiday season. As for the crushing video news, remember that original iPhone with the Lucky You sticker that sold for just over $40,000 earlier this month? We know who bought it and what they did with it. A piece from 9to5Mac says the buyer was tech reviewer and YouTuber Marquez Brownlee, and he opened it for YouTube. $40,320. I was kicking the numbers around in my head, wondering whether the ads on the video would make back the $40K or if it's just the cachet. The ability to say, you would pay $40,000 or more for a closed box just to keep it closed? Watch this. The video's got over 2 million views already. I'm guessing he's already made back the $40K. It's a pretty incredible video, according to 9to5Mac. I have not been able to bring myself to watch it yet, but, you know, you can watch $40,000 in value vanish almost instantly on Brownlee's YouTube channel. That's at youtube.com/MKBHD. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Factor. Use code MacOSKen50 at factormeals.com/MacOSKen50 for 50% off your first box. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.